Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. And, of course, you good old boys from Africa, the Big C tribe. You know we love saying hi to you. Also, you know we love you in Canada, but Big C, there's no one we love more than you good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Big C, December the 13th, 2007. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, to take a quote from the great Beyonce, I'm drunk in love with the election results in Alabama last night. You know,
Yeah.
This is a referendum for morality in America.
Oh,
With
yeah.
all that we've heard and seen going on in politics and in entertainment and
Yeah.
even in the corporate world, Charlton,
Yep.
it's finally that people are standing up. You know, we heard so often that, you know, the White House saying, well, let the people decide of Alabama. Well, finally we have some morality in the
Yeah.
state of Alabama,
Yeah.
Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, these people are not deplorables. They're intelligent.
Yep.
They understand what's right and what's wrong in society, whether it's in sports, whether it's in politics.
Yeah.
We had a huge cross-sector of people that made their voices heard, and
Yeah.
that's what the American public needs more. We can no longer be silenced as a society, whether we're talking about injustice,
Yeah.
immorality, Charlton, or abuse. These things have to come to a stop.
Yeah.
And the only way they come to a stop is that people speak up. We can't hide behind saying that we have terrorists from other countries in this country where we have our own terrorists
Yeah. Yeah.
born and bred within the United States that commit more heinous acts than anyone from outside of our borders has ever created, Charlton.
Yeah, and I
So-
agree with you. Yeah, very much so, Big C. I want to just want to backtrack on that. I do want to say this segment sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So, Big C, you brought up a point about, you know, everybody has a prejudice. Even religious people have prejudice. They seem to be the most judgmental people on the planet, always telling what God told them. At the same time, they're judging, which is, I think, one of the commandments is thou shalt not judge. At the same time, this flack that the South takes on being ignorant, not very well read, you know, maybe that's true for a lot of the people, because even though with all the issues that Roy Moore had, he still had about 45% of the people who don't mind if you date teenage girls. If you're an older person, you're dealing with 14-year-old girls, it doesn't matter to some people. Unfortunately, I think he won about 40% of the white women vote. So for the white women who are the ones who are dealing with, you know, men who are above their age, dealing with minors, a lot of them may have daughters, Big C, they've just consented to their daughters being courted by men who are, you know, above 18, which is statutory. I mean, that's criminal. But to get 40% of the white women vote when you know that your daughters are the ones being preyed upon, I still think there's a lot of backward thinking, Big C. I just gotta make that point, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I got to believe that the majority of those have been in the same type of situation that Roy Moore put young women into.
Yeah.
They were brought up in that lifestyle, Charlton. I mean, as much as things change, a lot of things stay the same.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at certain regions of the world and of the country. And that's one of those, Charlton, because a lot of those people, that's been the lifestyle, and we've notated it on our show many times.
Yep.
And so you can't sit there and expect everybody to change as the days change, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, some of this stuff has just been embedded in their society and thoughts forever. But I'm so glad that the majority spoke up, because this is a referendum for America.
Oh, yeah.
That we've had enough crap over the last year of the naysayers saying, well, it doesn't matter because this individual did it. Charlton, it matters if any individual does it.
I agree.
And we cannot accept it. You know, we cannot accept it, whether it's an athlete doing it, whether it's a politician.
Yep.
Because we've seen athletes lose their careers, Charlton, and go to jail.
Yeah.
Darren Sharp, a former all-pro defensive back in the NFL.
Yeah.
Got 15 years, Charlton, for sexual abuse of women.
Yeah.
And so I feel that politicians and even the media moguls should be into this same plight, Charlton. You should be put on trial based on these allegations. Let's hear these women.
Yeah.
These women are not coming out being collective liars. We have a liar saying that this didn't happen, they didn't know him, or I wouldn't see that type of woman. Yes, you would. You're a man.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Period.
And
point blank, you're a man. And testosterone drives you in many directions. And for these men to sit up and blatantly lie saying, well, I don't recall and I apologize. You didn't apologize while you were committing this act.
Yeah.
So don't apologize now.
Yeah, and I also want to thank some of our English listeners, especially when we look at in the world of soccer and Man City and Manchester United and Liverpool. And I want to thank all of them for following Big C Sports across the pond. But I want to bring this up too, because you really enlightened me, Big C, when we started doing Big C Sports, and I listened to other people, and I asked people to just challenge what we say to what other people say. When I would listen to some other sports, programming, in one of the biggest elections in the South in first time in 25 years, a Democrat's been chosen over a Republican, and we know Donald Trump won that state by about 20 some odd points, and I still hear people act as if they're just dumb. Like they just want to know, well, who's Alabama? Is Alabama going to win the national championship when one of the biggest historical happenings just happened in Alabama? We talked about Rosa Parks happened in Alabama. We talked about, the Montgomery boycotts happened down there in Alabama. The Edmund Pettus Bridge, Alabama. We talk about the church bombing, Alabama. And now, of course, we have national football championships, also Alabama. Integration was spearheaded, I think, by Kentucky, but also made more prominent with the great Paul Bear Bryant. Now, why do I bring that up? Because we talked about 2 years ago when we started doing the Big C Sports Show, and you were one of the leaders in doing this. You, Harry Edwards, and a lot of good guys, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you guys spearheaded this. When I say that politics in sports is competitive, and athletics will influence politics because people follow athletics. Charles Barkley, with all of the acclaim he's had on the basketball court, Big C, I'm more proud of him based on what he did last night as a human being and going down there and saying, people, wake up and get out and vote. Big C, that's just what you've been talking about for 2 years, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charles Barkley is a native son of Alabama, Charlton.
Yeah.
He grew up in Jim Crow, Charlton. He knows what it's like to be oppressed. He can sit there at a family gathering and sit there and see what all of his relatives have gone through over the decades, Charlton. His mother, his grandmother, his great-grandmother. He's a witness to that. And so it's very painful for a lot of African Americans because they came out in record numbers last night, Charlton, in a midterm election.
Yeah.
And so, as he said, you just can't sit there, and he also told the Democrats, you can't just come up here and promise us that you're going to do something for us. You have to do something for us.
Yeah.
I go back to the late George Wallace, Charlton, when he said segregation today, segregation now, segregation forever.
Oh, yeah, that knucklehead.
In Alabama back in the early 60s and 70s. And this is what the mindset of Alabama was, Charlton, and still is to a degree, because you think of all those people that he was preaching to in those days, Charlton, majority of them are still alive, okay?
Yeah.
And if you were a teenager at that time, you're the people that are Roy Moore's age, okay?
Yeah, that's true.
And so you're the base of what these type of people like George Wallace was speaking.
Yeah.
The only thing that they didn't want non-segregated in Alabama was athletics, Charlton, because the University of Alabama, University of Auburn are the successors of that, Charlton. They benefited greatly financially from desegregation.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
And anybody says that they haven't, that's the mainstay that has stabilized those two programs, Charlton, in the past several decades. But when you think about people being out there, Charlton, across the lines, the party lines, this is a bipartisan vote. It just wasn't the Democrats that were voting, for the winner last night, Charlton. This was the people that have moral aptitude, all right?
Yeah.
That's what this vote was about, moral aptitude. The president said, I'll take anybody. I don't care whether it's a child molester, a rapist, pedophile. I'll take the guy. I want him in my party. So that lets you know the type of company that the president is willing to keep. And even other Republicans, Charlton. Because when you accept somebody with that type of past and you know about it, and you invite him openly into your home, that means you're comfortable with that type of environment and lifestyle.
Well,
okay? That's not a political thing. You're comfortable with that lifestyle. When you know that a guy is preying on 14 and 16-year-old girls,
yeah,
and that's been his modus operandi most of his life, he's been banned from the mall in his local jurisdiction, and you say, hey, buddy, come on over.
Yeah.
Hang out at my house with my family.
Yeah.
That means you're comfortable living that lifestyle, Charles.
Well, you know, I'm so proud of our society, and especially, again, we talk about Charles Barkley and how, you notice how most of the bold men in the United States of America, going back to Marcus Garvey, you go back to even, you know, Malcolm X, even though Dr. King got a lot of acclaim and notoriety for speaking up and having the I Have a Dream speech and the March on Washington, which were seminal moments in American history, lightning rod moments that galvanized our society. But you got to ask yourself this question, because I hang around people who read a lot. Not everybody does, but I learn from people who read. I don't learn too much from people who are not well read. But when I contrast our white brethren, and I got to make this a point, because there's a lot of white Americans who marched during the civil rights also. But when I look at white women, pejoratively speaking, when someone who assaults women and attacks teenagers, you know, minors, can garner 41% of their vote, over 40%. And I think you brought it to my mind. If you've been disenfranchised, or sometime you're part of that color line that gets the benefit of the doubt when it comes to, you know, criminal justice reform, or someone being able to get a job. A lot of these women, they may be married to men who are very oppressive in the home, but they have a comfortable lifestyle. They have a nice house with a picket fence. They drive nice cars, but they know it's a male-dominated society, and they don't want to speak out against the men who dominate them, because they feel at least they get something to show for it. Big C, that's a sad statement. Is that what's going on in the South? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that goes on all over America. There's been a lot of women that have been oppressed in society because they've gotten comfortable in the lifestyle, and that wanting to go out and start all over again.
Yeah,
they're not. A lot of people don't want to do that, especially if you have a family.
Yeah,
they say it's easier to stay in an abusive, you know, denigrating situation than it is to go out and start all over, to create your own self-esteem and awareness to not be involved in it. We see that a lot in athletic situations. Where these women get into these relationships with athletes, and these athletes have been abusive, Charlton, over the years. You know, they've had multiple relationships outside their marriage. But these women stay around, and they're like, you know, it's hard to go out there and start all over. Where else am I going to go find a 7-digit income and a house and a lifestyle like this? So I stay here. And they use the story, well, I stay here for the benefit of the kids. The kids are going to get whatever they're going to get out of the relationship. Okay? You're staying around because you got into that at all costs. You know, you did whatever you could to cultivate that relationship. May not have been love at first, may have had love at some point. But you got into that situation, Charlton, and just like these Southern people, Charlton, it's hard to get out of that way of life that has always been around. When you think about, you're in the hotbed of segregation in America. You're in the hotbed of racism in America. Majority of negativity that came from America, Charlton, came from the South. Okay? Well, when we look at it, what really hurt America's development and also enhanced America's development came out of the South. But, you know, they're hard to let go of what they said made them what they were. When you heard Roy Moore during his campaign talk about, we need to go back to slavery mentality. That's when America was great. When we had all the control and blacks couldn't do anything. They had wonderful families, even though they couldn't name their own kids. Think about it. During slavery, blacks could not name their own children.
No.
The slave owners named their children. They could not rear most of their children. Most of their children were sold off. They were property. So families were broken apart all the time during slavery. And Roy Moore had the audacity to say that's when blacks were happy, when they were slaves. And so any black man or woman that voted for Roy Moore and said that he was going to make the South better and your life better, you know, the audacity of you to be a racist towards your own people.
I tell you what, Big C, it's chilling when you just said what you said, because for everybody says, what's this Black Lives Matter mean? I mean, can't we all just get along, and aren't you happy we have affirmative actions and civil rights and the voting? You have the right to vote, pretty much live where you want to live, apply for any job you want to apply for. But you just said something that kind of gave me pause. for every African American, I won't say every, I'll say 9 out of 10, we don't own our own names from ancestry. We have our own names based on what plantation we came from. And that's very painful for a lot of people, because there are a lot of Europeans that came here. They still have their indigenous name. They still have the names of their great-great-grandparents, the generations of grandparents that passed that name on, and that's the name they have. If you're African American, you're born here in the United States of America since civil rights and since slavery happened, your plantation name is the last name that we have. So a lot of times people still don't know where they came from. And I know some people say, well, why you got to always look at the past? Well, history will always repeat itself. And those without connection to their history are going to feel lost in this civilization. So I think what's more important for the younger people who are not willing to put up with that enmity that mainstream has had for people of color and for women, it's the young white vote that actually made a difference. I know the black vote put, Doug Jones over the top, and Doug Jones, is a Democrat. I hope that Charles Barkley made some points last night. Don't just get our votes. We need economic and criminal justice reform, not just for you to come around and say, hey, we believe in equality. That's important. But the thing that you just said is very stinging when you think about it. Most black Americans, we don't own our ancestral name. Big C, your thoughts?
We don't own it at all, Charlton. You think about an advertisement that's on television called Ancestry.com.
Yep.
It doesn't apply to black people, even though there's one that's on one of the commercials. It doesn't apply because you cannot search out your ancestry. Our ancestry was torn apart when it came to America, Charlton.
Yeah.
We were pushed around from plantation to plantation. Well, we don't like this one. We're going to sell it over here.
Yep.
We get more money for this. So you were moved around. You were just property, Charlton.
Yeah.
Where in white society, your family got a chance to evolve. You knew generations of people.
Yeah.
Slaves didn't know more than 2 generations of each other, Charlton.
Yeah.
They did not. They were not allowed to do that. And so, the minute you felt, the slave owner felt that you guys were building a bond, he would separate that because bonds meant strength.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
He didn't want that in his numbers. He felt as long as everybody was disenchanted,
Yep.
and you would be disenchanted. You think about it in today's society, Charlton. Someone comes along and takes your 3 children.
Yeah.
You're going to be disenchanted the rest of your life because you don't even know where they're going. That was the thing about it. Wasn't like you could make a phone call or send a piece of mail.
Yeah.
Once they were gone, they were gone. They could have been 40 miles down the road. You never knew where they were the rest of your life.
And that's
you never
yeah.
saw them or heard from them again. So when you become disenchanted and disenfranchised as a culture and a people, Charlton, that's what happened. And that's what, when you think about Roy Jones, that's what he was trying to bring back to Alabama during this election.
Yeah.
You think about if he wanted his way, let's put it in a sports perspective.
Yeah.
When he said blacks were happier than slaves, that desegregation was good for Alabama.
Yeah.
What would have been the thought of Nick Saban? Okay.
Yeah.
What would have been the thought of the Auburn coach if they said, okay, segregation?
Yeah.
What would the national championship game look like? The playoff series. If there was segregation still in the South, okay, how many teams from the South, Charlton, are in this playoff?
Well,
you got 3.
Yeah.
You got 3 teams from the South.
Yeah.
You got Clemson, you got Alabama, and you got Georgia.
Yeah.
So if Roy Jones was to have his way, and segregation was there, what would the University of Georgia Bulldogs team look like right now, Charlton?
Yeah.
What would the University of Alabama Crimson Tide look like, Charlton? What would the Clemson Tigers look like, Charlton, if Roy Jones was to have his way? Now, you think about it, Charlton.
Yeah.
2 of these teams have black starting quarterbacks.
Yeah.
They all have black starting running backs and wide receivers, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And their defensive lines all looked about that complexion, as well as their defensive backs.
Yeah.
And the receivers.
Yeah.
So, this is going to be a pretty lean and unentertaining game. If Roy Moore was able to affect athletics, think about that.
Yeah.
People say, well, he's just looking at the state. No, he wants to change the culture, just like the president. They don't like the culture of America being what it is.
No, they don't.
They honestly don't. When you sit out there and you call professional athletes SOBs, you don't want the culture of America being, and you only targeted at one culture, Charlton.
Yeah.
You didn't target it at anybody else. You targeted it at the African-American players in the NFL.
You know what? Yeah, you're right. You're right. I got to bring this point up because it just, before it slips my mind, when I hear that too, and I'm still affected by what you said, and I didn't even think about it because I was numb to it, kind of like women being numb to being sexually assaulted, or some guy, the cat calls or grabbing them by the butt or whatever, Trump grabs them by the vagina, And sometimes you're in shock, and there are a lot of women who come forward. And there's also there's a representative out of New York that he said that she she would beg or do whatever she could to get ahead in life, which was making a reference to the casting couch, which is very distasteful. But I thought about that again, because we're getting ready. The NFL is shaping up for the final couple of weeks of the playoffs chase and who's going to get in. College football is also getting ready for the bowl season and who's going to be favored over whom. And then you have the NBA, which is predominantly an African-American league, and they're getting ready to see who's going to be, the best teams after the Christmas break. But what you said is chilling to me, because you said most African-Americans, we don't own our last names. And when you think about what Roy Moore was trying to do last night, they say they couldn't care less, because it's just about separating. And what I look at also, another reason I'm embarrassed that Donald Trump has gotten so far in the white community, because they've still embraced this guy. Most of these people who are going to lose their elections too, because they put their hands around them and they embraced him, as people start to distance themselves because they're waking up. If you think about this, even Omarosa, who was part of one of his TV shows, she stepped aside. She's married to a black minister down in the South. And a lot of people, this is real talk, we wonder why is she so close to this guy who's a separatist and is endorsed by Steve Bannon and David Duke and them good old boys. Well, she resigned after Roy Moore lost last night. And I know there's a lot of things going on. I think maybe they talk about the Bible so much that there's no partiality in Christ. Maybe her husband got to her and said, what in the world are you doing supporting a guy who wants to see us go back into the segregated days, Big C? I think, again, we don't own our last name. So when they say, are you going to buy a jersey from a pro athlete, or are you going to buy a paraphernalia? The same thing that we had in common with slavery right now is when you look at college sports and we look at the bowl games, these black guys that make the billion-dollar industry, they don't own their last names, and neither did the slaves, Big C. How does that tie together, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, if you go along and you look at the top 20 African-American surnames in America,
yeah,
they are tied to slavery.
Yeah.
They are tied to our political founders in this country. If you look at it, you go back and you look at the first 20 presidents in the United States, okay, Charlton?
Yeah.
And look at the top 20 surnames of African-Americans. And you'll find where the ties are to African-American society. People say, no, that's a coincidence. No, it's a fact. They owned everything, Charlton. They owned the slaves. That's how they got their economic wealth. When you looked at the richest families in America at that time, Charlton,
yeah,
they got their economic wealth through slavery. That's why the African-American names are descendants of those people, Charlton.
Yeah.
Because they owned them. They sold them. They moved them around. So when you think that these people should think about equality in America, Charlton, that's a long ways from ever getting to that point.
Yeah.
Because until we acknowledge what got us to this point in America, Charlton,
yeah,
we will never gain equality. And those are not going to give it up. I mean, we have a president right now that's so polarizing as far as separatists in America.
Yeah.
Separation, talking about making America great again. He wants to eliminate equality.
Yeah.
That was the thought of America, having a great America, is that you had one society controlling the rest of America. If they say that subliminally, is that if we silence a certain part of America, Charlton,
yeah,
and leave control of America to a certain culture, Charlton, because if you look at his cabinet, you're going to tell me that there's not that many qualified African Americans in America, Charlton, that could be in a political cabinet.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we became unqualified as a culture after the last 8 years, Charlton.
Yeah.
Of having, so many involved as far as minority, and not just African American, Charlton,
yeah,
but minority.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, when we look at the cabinet of the current president, Charlton,
yep,
it resembles him, other than the orange hair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. That's true.
So when you look at his thought and what all of their thoughts are, Charlton,
yeah,
and the economic level of the people he brought in, and people say, well, people who make money know how to make money. Yes, they do, but they don't deal with the people who don't have their kind of money, Charlton.
Yes, true.
Think about the next time that Trump goes out and holds a middle-class event and invites 300 of the just common people of America to the White House. Never will happen, Charlton.
No.
Never will happen. So if you think this president is for you, look around and see the next time he holds a social event at the White House or even Washington, D.C., and invites you people to the White House and say, hey, he's one of us.
Big C, how many could even afford to go golfing at Mar-a-Lago? Okay, how many common people can afford to go down there and pay the fees just to get on that golf course? That tells you a lot. Yeah.
$200,000 a year membership, Charlton.
How much?
$200,000 a year membership. So if he's about the common man, okay, and granted, this golf course gets government subsidies also.
Yeah, it sure does.
So he's never cut that out. So
Nope.
when you think about it, Donald Trump's golf courses, all of them here in America, get government subsidies.
Yep.
Because what golf courses all do in America, Charlton, is that they reserve a part of wetlands. These are the lakes and stuff that they have on.
Yep.
And so as long as they have these wetlands on their golf courses, they receive up to $1 million in government subsidy.
Wow.
So when you're talking about draining the swamp,
Yeah.
Donald Trump is bilking the swamp on his golf course.
To build golf courses. And speaking of golf courses, I do want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. For every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports, whether you're a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school mom and pop team. They all need athletic and event insurance. And then when you reach out to them, let them know that Big C sent you. You can call 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. And let them know that Big C sent you. Big C also, I just got to finish up this thought because, you know, sometimes things happen in life and you realize that, you know, maybe I'm guilty of that. Maybe I'm part of that problem because I've been a knucklehead at times, and oftentimes it would take my elders or people that I respected to say, hey, Charles, why don't you think about doing it this way? And I'll never forget when I went to college, there were some things that I learned just by being around people who'd already been there. But I gotta touch one more thing on this, because when you just brought up the days of slavery and how we had this free labor and how it built up the white society, and now you think, well, how do people, I mean, think about it. When you are born in America, you're a person of color, you think, how has everything been systematically created so that the most people in the country that make the most money, they're Caucasian? It's not because they worked harder. They got free labor for about 400 years, and that was passed on just like slave names were passed on. Okay, there's a lot of people who inherited land and also resources, and the way the laws were built so that whites had ownership. Now you say, well,
Andrew Jackson. Think about Andrew Jackson.
Yep, vetoed the bill.
What did he overturned
40 acres and a mule. Yeah.
Okay, Andrew Jackson, president. Think about how many Americans have the last name Jackson, Charlton.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, that's
Jackson,
true, Big C.
Think about how many African Americans have the name Jackson.
Yeah.
Yet he took away the 40 acres and a mule
Yep.
that were advocated out for slaves.
Yeah.
Once they were released, Charlton.
Yeah.
This is the president, and look how many black Americans, Charlton, have the name Jackson, who are descendants of his ownership.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, that's
They're
very true.
descendants of his ownership, and he took away what was given to them.
And he's I guess on record, Donald Trump says he's one of the greatest American presidents. Can you imagine if you're just a dumb person and you're giving someone like Roy Moore 41% of the vote? And even Trump says that Jackson was one of his favorite presidents, a guy who took land and ownership of land and money away from black families when they were after the Emancipation Proclamation. He did that after Lincoln was assassinated. So these things, it goes back to, what is your last name? I think, you know, the great Spike Lee did a movie called Malcolm X, and it had the great Denzel Washington, a lot of great talented people, and he played Malcolm X. And at the end of the day, Malcolm said, well, what is your last name? We have a name that was given by slave owners, okay? And people say, well, just get over that. But we don't ask white Americans to get over that either. So when it comes back to this thing that I'm going to tie into what happened last night with Charles Barkley, that I was so proud of as an African American. Number one, with the bowls coming up, with college bowl games coming up, you're going to see the top teams have black athletes. About 80% of them are African American. It goes back to Andrew Jackson vetoing the bill that would have given us all 40 acres and a mule, and maybe the chance to start our own research of our own history and ancestry, okay? We didn't get that chance. Now you have this money grab that's going on with the NCAA, whereas mostly black athletes cannot get paid for making over $1 billion collectively for white institutions. And we don't own our own names, but if you even use the name you have to go out and sell merchandising, Big C, they stripped your scholarship. That's not much different than what Andrew Jackson did back in the day, but we're all going to celebrate it. Alabama, We're going to celebrate Clemson and Georgia and Oklahoma. And I think as people start getting more educated, we'll realize that we're also perpetuating that same garbage that Andrew Jackson did. You can't get any money for your labor, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I want to perpetuate this on one university. I want to go to the University of Oklahoma when I look at this incident, Charlton.
Yeah.
When we think about a year ago this time with Joe Mixon, former running back at the University of Oklahoma, was being ridden hard by the media, Charlton, up and down, saying he shouldn't be drafted. It was protest against him being drafted for an incident that occurred when he was a freshman at the university 3 years prior to Charlton. Okay, there was all type of backlash, even by your buddy Kuiper, saying he shouldn't be drafted. He was
Kuiper's not my buddy, Biggs. You keep spreading rumors, man.
I know you get a Christmas card from him.
No, he don't send me nothing.
Okay, so I look at that in contrast when we talk about the difference between black and white society, Charlton.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma is still considered part of the South and the Midwest altogether.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's catapult to this year, Charlton. They had a Heisman Trophy winner from Oklahoma. Okay.
Yeah.
Who did more heinous acts than what Joe Mixon did, Charlton?
Yeah.
You know, obstruction of justice, DUI, running from the police, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, disorderly conduct on the playing field.
Yeah.
You think about all the things that he did. There's been no backlash against Baker Mayfield, Charlton.
They gave him a trophy.
Here's that story. You gave him a Heisman trophy.
Yeah.
For obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
For grabbing his crotch on the field.
Yeah.
You know, disorderly conduct basically in public. Because what he's doing. You gave him a Heisman trophy. Said, hey, we can't do without this guy.
Yeah.
But the black guy was expendable, Charlton, through the media.
Yep.
So when we look at it, the sports media, the mainstream media, Charlton, everybody took exception to Joe Mixon as a person. His actions were not, you know, in question about what happened, even though he was in a defense mode when he did it.
Yep.
You still shouldn't strike a woman.
Yeah.
But Baker Mayfield, what he did is on camera. Okay? It's on camera. Everybody in America saw it. And you went out and said, this is a man of high character and high moral for doing a DUI. You being an African-American get a DUI, okay?
Yeah.
See how much time you get. I mean, we've seen it on the white society. You know, Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, gets caught with $27,000 in Oxycontin. I think he picked up in your neighborhood.
No, he went to my neighborhood, Big Z. Not at all. Don't start those rumors. I don't know the man.
He had $27,000 in Oxycontin.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
He was inebriated when he was picked up. You saw him staggering as they were taking him into the jail.
Yep.
Okay? But he didn't fail a drug test. You know, that's the ironic part of it. He didn't fail an intoxicology test, Charlton. He didn't.
Yeah.
And he had the $27,000 in illegal Oxycontin.
Yeah.
He did no jail time. That's intent to traffic and distribute. You know, one individual should not be able to use that much Oxycontin.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Not. But he didn't get charged with anything, Charlton. He went into a diversity program, you know, did 3 months in there.
Yep.
But he wasn't a minority, Charlton. So, you know, he got a slap on the wrist. Baker Mayfield was stopped driving drunk in Oklahoma, okay, Charlton?
Yeah.
Drunk. Jeopardizing lives just like Irsay. He's out at night driving. He gets pulled over by a couple different law enforcement officers, Charlton. They didn't pull out a gun on him.
No.
They didn't say they felt threatened.
No.
We all saw it on camera.
No.
Even though he bolted from them, normally if you're black and you run, you get shot in the back several times. Okay?
That's happened.
Because you were going for a taser and a gun. We've seen this on television many times. Okay? Baker Mayfield got a pass. You were okay driving DUI. He didn't get suspended from the University of Oklahoma, Charlton. Look how many African-American athletes in the last decade have been suspended from their university being intoxicated in public, Charlton.
Wow,
Look how many African-American athletes have been suspended. Basketball, football, baseball, track and field.
Yeah.
There's dozens and dozens of them, Charlton, and some have even lost their scholarship. Baker Mayfield didn't even get time off, okay?
Yeah.
He didn't. And not only that, did he get to start every game except for one. He missed 2 plays, Charlton.
Yeah.
He won a Heisman Trophy. He grabbed his crotch on national television, spewing profanities, and everybody that could read lips, you know, with 2 eyes knew exactly what he was saying. He's the broadcaster. And everybody sung this guy's praise. They said, this was a Roy Moore guy.
Yeah.
Let's take things back the way they used to be. Okay, where we could get away with anything.
That's incredible. And I'm glad you bring it up, Big C. And again, I love history and I love reading, but I was, you know, even just doing the show right now, Big C, I was thinking about what you said. We don't even own our last name, no matter who you are in this country. If you're African American, I'm going to say 95% do not have their name from the ancestry that began even 1,000 years ago. We know that all life began in Africa, according to science. All life began along the Nile region of Africa, and that's an undisputed fact. But the fact that we don't own our last names, but I want to bring this up with what Charles Barkley did again, because I look at last night what happened and with Doug Jones beating Roy Moore, and Jones, who had mostly an integrated, following down there in the South, and Roy Moore was the guys like Steve Bannon and David Duke and Donald Trump and them good old boys. When the Nazis praise you and are sad when you lose, what's that tell you about your following? But for the black vote, and for black Americans, and for all people, no one's asking for anything more than an opportunity, the same way slavery and 400 years of free labor gave our mainstream society a big leg up on having economic opportunities, Big C, and even the mindset that came along with it and all the Jim Crow laws that happened even after slavery was abolished. If you look at what the black vote did, it made Doug Jones the winner. It defeated Roy Moore. Now, at some point in time, we just talked about the NCAA for the top teams. 90%, or say even 80% of their best athletes are African American. At some point in time, we know the antitrust violation is when you don't pay people for their labor. When the black athlete learns to do what the black voter did last night in Alabama, maybe we'll get some legal help behind making sure that this free labor is over, just like in the days of Jim Crow and also the days of slavery. The $1 billion that will be made for the college football bowl system, the majority of it will not even touch the hands of a black-owned bank account, Big C, and that's a fact, okay? There's one way to change that. It's called the law. It's called getting lawyers in legal representation, and what Charles Barkley talked about, don't just come get my vote. We need some type of economic reform and social justice reform, because if not, Big C, we'll be scoring football touchdowns and making baskets and hitting home runs for the next 100 years. All we'll get is a pat on the back and a hat. What can we do to make sure that what Charles Barkley talked about last night and what you started talking about ever since I've known you, and especially during the Big C Sports Show, what's the next step and make sure we get paid for our labor, Big C? Does that make any sense?
Well, Charlton, the first and foremost is what Charles said last night. It's the politicians. You have to demand something for your vote. Your vote is of value.
Yep.
Because these politicians are not doing their job for free.
Nope.
I would love to see the Senate, the Congress, and the House say, okay, we're going to give up our salary for a year because we're going to do this for the American people.
Yeah, right.
We're going to give up our flying privileges for a year because we're going to do this for the American people.
Yeah.
For all those Americans out there that are struggling to make their bills, to pay back their student loans,
yeah,
all of the struggling Americans, we're going to give up our salary and donate it to charity for a year.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen because our politicians really don't feel what we feel. But when you talk about making a change in athletics, Charles Barkley said it best. You have to demand something for your vote.
Yeah.
When you just go out and vote for somebody because he goes out and he toggles through your neighborhood and says, vote for me, I'm going to make a change.
Kissing babies.
No,
Kissing
you have
babies.
to get them to sign a contract of carriage, Charles.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. You have to get that politician to sign a contract with those people who are voting for him, his constituents in those certain neighborhoods. You need to come to your politician just like athletes when they go to general managers.
Yep.
And that general manager has a contract to say, you have to fulfill this part of your contract to be in our organization.
Yep.
Or even when you sign a scholarship with a university,
yep,
you have to fulfill this part of this contract to continue with this scholarship and play in our program.
Yeah.
You have to do that to politicians. When they come and politicize and you know, campaign in your neighborhood,
yep,
in your district, the people have to have a contract with this politician saying, this is what we expect.
Yeah.
And if you don't give us what we expect, is that we're going to put you up for recall, and we want you to sign this contract saying that you're committed to doing this for us.
Yeah.
Athletes have to do that, Charlton. And these athletes vote. Charlton, you think about it. You're above 18 years of age.
Yeah.
You have the right to vote, and you should vote.
Yeah.
Don't give up on that freedom that many African Americans have died for, Charlton, over the years.
Yeah.
The freedom to vote, the ability to vote. We look at it and say, well, my vote's not going to matter.
Oh, it matters.
It mattered last night in Alabama.
It sure
Those
did.
people that were tired of being oppressed. And athletes, former athletes, you have to go out. If you want to change of the revenue stream
Yeah.
in the NCAA, Charlton, that happens through politics. This
Yeah.
is a politic-driven organization, okay?
Yep.
It's not a private entity. You think about these universities. These are all state-run universities, Charlton.
Yeah.
These are all benefactors of the state. When you look at these head coaches in college football,
Yeah.
these are state employees. These are the highest paid employees in the state.
Yeah.
So this money that they get is relegated through their state senate, their state congress,
Yeah.
on how much they can make. So until these politicians are driven by the fans, the local public, saying that the athletes have to get some of this money that you're giving the coaches, Charlton,
Yeah.
you vote them out of office. Just like you can vote them in, you vote them out. But it's not up to the athletes to go out and say, we want our share. The politicians have to give them a share, Charlton, because every head coach that's at a state institution, okay,
Yep.
his salary has to be okayed by the state political regime.
Yeah.
So they can do the same thing for athletes.
You know, that makes so much sense. When I thought about what you said again, that we don't own our last names, that's kind of chilling, Big C. I want everyone to just think about this, especially your athletes. And for the people who are playing in these games, and I love the game too. If you love something and something's wrong, it doesn't mean you disband it. You just make it better, like making a car better. We don't have to say, just because you're intelligent, you got to stop playing the sport. We just got to make it better. If you make let's say you make $50,000 a year, okay? It takes you 20 years of working to make $1 million. 20 years to make $1 million if you make $50,000 a year. If you make $100,000 a year, you got to work 10 years to make $1 million. Would you believe some of these coaches in these bowl playoffs are going to make $1 million bonus on black labor? $1 million in one night on black labor. When you think about that, that's on top of the salary that they're getting for the whole year. So do that one more time for you fathers who are having your kids go to these top institutions to play football for free. Yeah, you get an education, but you're playing for free, okay? And you're putting $1 million in the one man's bank account in one night, or at the most 2 games because they got the first round and the second round. But just think about how powerful that is. And I think we got to get on this thing with criminal justice reform. And also there has to be some loans made in communities of color to put people back to work. Because see, that's how we got to fix this problem. And the last thing I'll say on this, and I thank you so much for just, bringing up that we don't own our names. When you watch the NBA tonight, and when you watch the NFL this weekend, and when you watch college, the bowl games coming up in the next 30 days, whenever they say LeBron James scored 30 points, Steph Curry scored 30 points, Kevin Durant 30 points, Antetokounmpo 30 points, whoever scored 30 points, James Harden scored 30 points, Westbrook scored 30 points. Doesn't matter who they are. Most of them do not own their last name. They couldn't trace it back past to the generation when our families were freed, Big C. And I think that's very chilling when you think about what we're worth. And the last thing I'll say to that, we got to get some attorneys who understand how to put things in law to make sure that athletes can start getting paid on their labor. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's not the attorneys. It's your local state House of Representatives,
yep,
your Congress, and you say on the state level, Charlton.
Yeah.
It's not a national thing. This is state level. You think about it, like I said earlier, the states determine how much head coaches make in college football.
Yeah.
Because they're the final say-so. They are state employees. When you look at it, these coaches, yes, they're employed by the university, but these are state universities.
Yeah.
So who allocates the budget and the funds for these state universities?
Yeah.
It's your local state politicians, Charlton.
Yeah.
So they're okaying that a coach can receive this absorbent amount of money and the players receive none.
Yeah.
These players, technically, Charlton, are state employees, okay?
Yeah.
They're on state scholarships.
Yeah.
That makes you a state employee. So you are allowed to receive state money. That's what a stipend is, Charlton.
Yep.
That's what a scholarship is. But they convert it, they say, okay, you think about this. When you're on a full-ride scholarship, Charlton, there's no money exchanging hands.
No.
So you can't say that scholarship's worth $40,000. It's not. No one is paid $40,000 for your scholarship.
Yeah.
They give you a stipend. There used to be the Pell Grants and all of that, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's state money.
Yeah.
And it's still state money. So when they hire a coach, and you look at the SEC, let's make a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
In the SEC, Charlton, 8 of the highest paid assistant football coach programs are in the SEC.
Yeah.
In the United States. that the minimum one makes $3.7 million as assistant coach's salary, the combined assistant coaching staff.
Wow.
The highest, Charlton, is $7 million for the entire staff, okay, of assistant coaches in the SEC. So it ranges from $3.7 to $7.1 million that assistant coaches making. That budget, Charlton, is allocated by the state. So you got a head coach that's making $9 million, and his assistants combined is making $7 million. So there's $16 million, Charlton, in revenue going to a coaching staff at a university that has to be okayed by the state.
Yep.
So when we talk about politics and sports being synonymous with each other, Charlton,
yeah.
Your local taxpayer money is going to these coaches. That's where it's going to. And you think about some of these schools and local high schools and junior highs and grammar schools, Charlton, they could utilize some improvement, but you're bettering the way for a coach that's making all of this money. When you have an assistant coach at Charlton making $1.7 million, okay?
Wow.
He's assistant. Head coach making $9 million, Charlton. So when we talk about athletes not getting any of this, it's not the athletes, Charlton. It's just local and state politicians that are saying that the athletes shouldn't get paid. Yes, the NCAA is a part of that, Charlton.
Yep.
But the NCAA is the governing body of all these state institutions. Let's be realistic.
Yep.
So their money comes from the states also.
Yeah.
So everybody's making money off the state except for the athlete. The athlete is making money for the state because these institutions are state institutions. So the money that the athletes are bringing in, Charlton, doesn't just go to the institution, it goes to the state.
Wow, that's a lot of information there, Big C. And now, with all the, I think there's 16 teams in the SEC, and you talked about collectively how much money these coaches and assistants make. Big C, each team has about, they say it's between 65 and even 100 players that suit up. How much money do the players make collectively, Big C, in the SEC?
Well, I think they're going to get a sack lunch, maybe even a warm meal before the 4 hours before the game, Charlton. They may get that, but they'll get a sack lunch at least after the game. They probably have some Subway on the bus, because you can eat a cold sandwich along with a soft drink.
Yeah, you can eat it fresh.
Maybe even a Gatorade, but you think about that, Charlton. They'll get a new sweatsuit after the game and a new hat and probably a new pair of sneakers, and they should be happy that they've received those things.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because some of those players have gone out there. Some have gotten injuries, Charlton, that will end their careers as an amateur athlete. A few will go on and play pro ball. But when you think about it, Charlton, there's going to be 4 teams playing for the national championship.
Yep.
And each one of these teams for this series, Charlton, will address in over 100 players.
Yep.
Think about that.
Yep.
So you say collectively in these 4 teams, in these 4 games, Charlton, that they will dress some 420 to 450 players between these 4 teams.
Yep.
For that first round of games.
And pay them no money.
No money will exchange hands for the players, okay? 450 athletes. Of those 450, Charlton, 300 are going to be African-American.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
300.
Yep.
Now, people always say, well, they got a chance to go pro. And we just said 450 athletes, Charlton, between 4 teams.
Yeah.
The NFL only employs, I believe, 1,580 players, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
So you got 450 between 4 teams and only 1,580 play in the NFL. So as a realistic person, what's the percentage of the guys that are playing for the national championship going to have a chance to get employment in the NFL? And of that 450, who has to seek employment elsewhere, Jonathan? Of that 450, maybe a dozen will work in the NFL. Maybe a dozen on a high end. A dozen.
That's true, Big C. And maybe every team will have 2 to 3 players that actually can make the league. It doesn't mean they're all going to last more than 3 years. Big C, I'm so proud of athletes and politics and being smart people to get together. Good things tend to happen. So I'm so proud of you, number one, for bringing that platform to the Big C Sports Show. And I see a lot of people all over the world have been following that, especially in the United States of America. We got to keep it up. And again, I'm proud of Charles Barkley for getting people out to vote. The next thing we have to do is tackle how do we get people paid. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Bondini Brown. He was Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. He would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, what I'm amazed about right now is what baseball is doing. It sounded like basketball a few months ago before the season started. With the big trades that are moving, we just saw Giancarlo Stanton just go to the Yankees. Now there's talk of Manny Machado leaving the Orioles and going to the Yankees. This is reminding me of the Yankees of the 70s under George Steinbrenner.
Yeah.
When he stockpiled all the superstars and went on several World Series runs.
Yep.
I see that happening all over again. If they can get Manny Machado, one of the best infielders in all of Major League Baseball, who can play third and shortstop, Charlton.
Yep.
This Yankees team is just carbon written for the World Series next year.
Well, you know, they say if you're not cheating, you're not trying, and good job for them good old boys down south that gave away Stanton to the Yankees, because sometimes you got to have some inside information, Big C. And speaking of inside information, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, the #1 network in the United States of America, and Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. We always want to tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no woman should have to deal with that garbage all on her own. And as we tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.